All right, everybody. I am back with a brand new DC update. I was actually tied up for the last 24 hours, and I finally have the opportunity to put out a new video. And what a way to start the day to wake up to the news that HBO Max, well, not just HBO Max, but Warner Brothers Discovery is really looking at licensing some HBO Max originals to Netflix. And it is supposedly more than we anticipated. And we're going to talk about why that's happening and how that does open the door for the Snyderverse to be restored. But first, we're going to look at a couple of pictures here today in regards to the box office for The Flash. It is getting worse and worse. They can no longer talk about the historic drop from Batman vs. Superman because it is far worse for The Flash. The Flash is the worst performing DC film, I think, ever that's within this kind of continuity or with this kind of star power behind it. I mean, you've got Michael Keaton back as Batman, and that didn't even get people into theaters, and there's a reason for that, and I have talked about that. It does have to do with business, and the first business, the first announcement that James Gunn made when he took over was Henry Cavill was gone and that he was rebooting everything. He came out with that big announcement. That has to be the dumbest move that anybody has ever made in regards to business and entertainment. You doomed the next 4 films. Now, they're going to sit there and try to blame it, blame it on the fact that people just lost interest in the DCEU. That is not the case because people came back for Black Adam. They did, and it didn't even get a China release. Had it gotten a China release, it made far more money than it did, and things were moving in the right direction. But as soon as he announced that reboot, boom, the bottom fell out. And I don't know if that was on purpose or if they're just that stupid. It's one or the other. Now, we're going to look at the numbers. We're going to look at a couple of these pictures, and then I want to talk about this whole Zack Snyder to Justice League thing. So the first was posted here, and this is interesting. It says The Flash is likely to wrap under $180 million globally. Boy, that's what it was originally expected to make here in the U.S. alone on opening weekend, which is lower than what Green Lantern did in 2011. And this was the right direction, which critics and real DC fans were referring to. Guess the audience was more interested in what Snyder was doing with these characters. And that is very true. And we're going to talk about that today, too, on why this is not working and what shift needs to take place. This just came out also from Kevin Smith that Warner Brothers tried to get Christian Bale back to appear as Batman at the end of The Flash, but he refused. I find this hilarious. So you've got Ben Affleck who turned away. You've got Christian Bale who's turned away. They want nothing to do with what Warner Brothers Discovery is doing going forward. It's kind of interesting how everybody is kind of turning away. And then this is pretty crazy that The Flash earned $4.5 million on Friday, which was an 81% drop from its domestic opening day. How does that even happen? Now, I didn't think this movie was going to do as well, but I expected this to do better than Black Adam. But even I was wrong on this one. People are upset. People are upset that they were lied to by the studio because it was, and first of all, I'm going to mention something about the DCEU, and it has nothing to do with just Zack Snyder. It has to do with the DCEU in general. The announcement with Black Adam was that Henry Cavill was back. It was all over social media. If you had a social media account after Black Adam came out, you saw that video. It was talked about. It took the internet by storm that Henry Cavill was back as Superman. That got people excited. The internet was on fire. There's no question about it. But then a few months later, this announcement by Gunn was made, and that Henry Cavill had to make an announcement that he was no longer going to be Superman going forward. That was the very first thing that happened. You upset a whole bunch of people because everybody agreed that Henry Cavill was the right person for that role, and it goes beyond just the Snyder fans. This is for the DCEU in general. People were okay with that choice of Superman. That's what the audience expected, to happen, was for him to come back. And then they change everything. They pivoted. This is the issue with Warner Brothers, is that they continually pivot. They did this way back when this all started. Now, you're going to hear a lot of people say, well, this has to do with the movies being too dark. People didn't like Zack Snyder's vision. That's not true. More people were going to the theaters for those films. It is a fact. They didn't make as much money because the budgets to create those movies and advertise them were pretty high. But the fact is, more people were going to the theater, and they continued to go through Aquaman. So this excuse that Batman vs. Superman ruined everything is a false narrative. It is not true. It is not true at all. You cannot debate that fact. People continued to come for films afterwards. It's when the studio went to Birds of Prey, which was not on their original slate, and one thing I did get wrong was that Shazam was on their original slate, but then you had Birds of Prey come out when they wanted to change everything, and that's where there was this massive pivot, and ever since then, things have been bad until Black Adam, when all of this went down. The Rock was right. The Rock, Pam Abdi, Mike DeLuca, they were right. Now, we do know that there is a plan B in place. So let's look at a few facts here. Number one, we know that Warner Brothers Discovery is out of money. They have no money. How they are ever going to get the DCU off the ground is mind-boggling. Where are they going to get the money to do that? Now, people don't understand. I'm in the industry. And what some people don't understand is that these projects are not funded by the studios themselves. They are funded by investors. Okay? But investors want a return on their investment. How they're going to get those investors to invest in Superman Legacy after everything that's happened, Warner Brothers does need to go out and find out why this happened. If they really truly don't understand why the fans have turned away, they maybe need to find out, because this is going to affect everything moving forward. So let's talk about Zack Snyder's Justice League moving to Netflix. So we do know that Zack Snyder's Justice League did move to Netflix, and it was a huge hit when it hit the platform. HBO Max does not have, or now Max, does not have the subscriber count that Netflix does. It doesn't have the audience that Netflix does. They licensed Zack Snyder's Justice League, which was an HBO Max exclusive, over to Netflix. They had it in both places. They are now talking about licensing original materials from HBO over to Netflix and from Max. Supposedly, and I have not been able to confirm this, but supposedly in that deal was Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, the Ultimate Edition, and also the David Ayers cut of Suicide Squad. Why would Netflix be interested in those properties? Well, it's pretty obvious at this stage. With HBO Max being out of money, they don't have a lot of options. They can't make any major blockbusters. Netflix can. Netflix is all invested in Zack Snyder right now, and they could move these properties over to Netflix and relaunch this to get the rest of the story told and to fund the money for the last two films, which means HBO or Max or Warner Brothers Discovery would have to license that over to Netflix. For everybody who said this wasn't possible, well, it's definitely possible, and there are talks going on behind the scenes. It has been confirmed by both Deadline and Variety. This is not just me saying this. These things are happening behind the scenes. They are having talks, and these properties are within those talks. And if that happens, that does open the door for Zack Snyder's Justice League to be continued. And honestly, I believe this was the plan B, because this is nothing but money for Warner Brothers Discovery, because they don't have to be a part of that. Now, what I like about this and what has me excited for the future is the fact that with a lot of these releases with Netflix, they do release them in theaters for a couple of weeks once they get released for people who do not have a Netflix subscription. And I've been to a couple of those movies to help support those films and to help bring those films more money. Even though I have Netflix and I have a theater I can watch stuff, I still go to the movies quite often. And I think this would be a good litmus test. I talked about this in my plan to fix these issues. The one thing that is clear is that there is a divided fan base, a very divided fan base. I've seen it like nothing else all over social media. I mean, now that I have a social media presence for this, I've seen some pretty crazy things over the last week. I've had people say that I wish death upon actors. Somebody sent me a message today showing me that somebody made a 44-minute video mocking, not necessarily mocking, but making fun of a video I put up. 44 minutes. That's the sign of a mentally disturbed person. I mean, come on. I'm trying to give people the facts and bring the news on what is happening behind the scenes. It is my review channel, and I am going to give my opinions on all that stuff as well. But you cannot deny that Warner Brothers Discovery is out of money. They have no money. They have to do something. And the DC universe is DOA right now. They don't have the money to do it. I don't know how they're going to get investors to invest in those films to begin with. So they've got to do something to generate money. And we already know that they're selling off some of their music. They're trying to sell off some of the publishing. I talked about that in my last video. And now we have this where they're talking to give some exclusive, originals to Netflix. That's huge. They did take some stuff off the network, and I do believe that was for licensing. Westworld is no longer on HBO or on Max, and I do believe that they're going to license some of that stuff to other streaming platforms so that can make them more money. I don't know if Max will actually make it in the end. It's the one area, surprisingly, where they were making money. They did make a massive profit on Max, but if they start giving their exclusives out, they're going to have to sell those IPs or license them out for a whole crap ton of money. And there is absolutely an opening now for Zack Snyder's Justice League for that story to be completed and for us to see stuff that has never been released before, like David Ayer's Suicide Squad. So I hope these things happen. I hope that Max and Warner Brothers Discovery is going to see the light at the end of the tunnel and see that they can appease both sides of the fandom and get everybody back in their good graces, because right now it's not happening. Just the amount of animosity online is just, it's thick. It's crazy thick. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen in my lifetime when it comes to fans and what's happening behind the scenes. It's kind of strange. It's kind of strange. All right, I do appreciate the support. There's my video for the day. We will see you guys on the next update.